taken by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani. Around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
And the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
We have
Wait, have
Jason
we
on the
started
pod
yet?
today. He's coming back. I think we started.
Well, I just let you
Hey,
go.
we
We,
start?
we were still
having an
rolling the
intro.
intro while you were kind of doing your intro, and then it just kind of started with,
Pat
and we
was
got
back.
Jason back, so it worked out.
All right, this is why we let you do this. You go.
It's all right. We could just get rid of this in post.
Yeah, no, it's staying forever now. But
Sweet.
all right, well, we're back.
Yeah, so we're the first division preview / deep dive. I don't know.
Nailed
Yeah,
it.
you guys picked Calgary. I honestly thought it was going to be LA. I just thought you were going to troll us and pick LA. Everybody picked the Pacific Division, and I thought
Yeah.
it's either they're going to pick LA or they think they can pick Anaheim. And then Anaheim just wasn't part of the vote.
Well,
so.
in everyone's defense, because I saw that too, and I was like, well, I'll pick Anaheim. If I'd really like to hear what you guys think about Anaheim. And then it's like, oh no, by the way, don't pick Anaheim. You played yourself. I think it was was the little gift that Steven did there. But yeah, maybe next time specify what team.
We just thought, all
besides
right, we thought,
there.
I thought it was obvious that closer to the season, because we've done this every year, that we will do the season preview for the Ducks. So why would we?
I'll forgive you. You haven't met our fans, mostly because you're in Canada.
True.
Me and Steven and Pat have met our fans. You have to lay it out. As bland, as obvious as it might be, they need to know the rules.
Yeah, now there's no more polls. So now, no.
What was funnier though was Seattle being second, right?
I thought they might be first.
I thought Vegas was going to get it.
Yeah,
Vegas would have
that's
sucked.
Seattle.
I would have been pumped.
Let's sync that up. Seattle is going to suck. So that's done. Now what are we doing? Calgary?
Yes. Calgary before adding everybody should have sucked. Maybe worse than Seattle after losing Goodrow.
I wouldn't even say it sucked. I would be like, wow, they lost a lot. They lost 215, 20, 25 points.
Yeah, it was like 216, 217 points they would have lost.
Yeah, 115 and 101.
Yeah.
And they recovered more than that, right?
I think so. Well, Huberdeau had 115. Kadri
15.
had.
Which matched Gaudreau. Kadri was a little over a point per game. I think he was in
Did he get
high
100?
80s.
I thought.
But then add Uyghur into that.
Did Kadri not get 100?
Kadri.
Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking.
Let's see. Kadri and Huberdeau did 202 combined points. And the other guys, Kachuk and Johnny, did 219. So they're about 17 points less.
Wow, I don't know why I thought he had 100.
But then you add Uyghur into it, and he had 44 points from the back end, second on his team from the back end. And they kind of made up the points, got close to the goals, kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen a team lose two superstars and recover that quickly. And it's
within weeks.
It's a very lucky circumstance in a sense that Florida was willing to move a player of that stature. Like, there's nobody else around the league that would have been willing to move a player like that, and you just got that unique scenario where Florida would have had to pay him a lot next year, and the rest of their roster is a lot younger compared to Huberdeau, that they could make that move and not completely derail the progress that they're making. And then you get, kind of lucky in the sense that you've got a free agent in Nazem Kadri, who there weren't a lot of suitors that were ready to step up and pay him what he wanted, that he could stay on the market a little bit longer, let you make that move, get it done, and that he was willing to come there. And then you got Uyghur in there as a bonus. I'm trying to remember a team who's lost as much as Calgary in one offseason and was able to replace it.
Gained as much as they did.
Yeah, they're arguably better.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, like they were known for their offense, and you can, highlight that between Goudreau and Kachuk. And even though you don't have kind of that high profile, those high profile players, but Huberdeau, Kadri is kind of a high profile player, but then you add in Uyghur to it, they kind of increase their defense, and from defense also their offense, and then just kind of replace their offense, but just slightly a minus. I mean, I just can't imagine moving so many centerpieces from such an elite perspective or an elite team, and then just absolutely replace it perfectly, and if not, improve it a little bit. I mean, everyone's kind of like, well, what'll happen? Who knows?
Yeah.
But the fact that you lost that and you were able to replace it quickly within weeks is freaking amazing.
And I think stylistically too, right? Like Huberdeau, fairly similar to Johnny Gaudreau. I prefer Huberdeau in the way he plays to Johnny Gaudreau. I really do like Johnny Gaudreau, but I think there's a little bit more to what Huberdeau brings to his game. And people will sit there and say, okay, like he's playing on Florida. Most of the time, he played without Barkov. Like he did this on a line with I think Sam Bennett for a while. Hit up a fair amount of different centers.
Also from Calgary.
It was him, Bennett, and Duclair.
Yeah,
was the second line that was really humming.
He's not from Calgary. Huberdeau?
Sam Bennett was.
Oh, Sam Bennett. Oh, okay, yeah. I thought you were saying Huberdeau was from.
No. Sam Bennett
from
was
the
there.
Calgary area.
There's some weird connections here. So.
And Kadri in the play style is fairly similar to Matthew Tkachuk. Plays kind of on the edge, draws a lot of penalties. Is a pest. Not the same, I guess, skill
Doesn't
level.
Fight, but still gets in there.
Yeah, he's going to provide you that side of things that Tkachuk brought, and still bring the points, and not maybe to the same level. There's obviously a drop off there, but it was the closest with the players available they were going to get to replacing him. And then, like you'd mentioned, you bring in Uyghur to that blue line that needed another guy like that. Hanifin and Anderson were great last year, but from there it really dropped off with Zadorov, Tanev, Shillington, and to add Uyghur as the third guy there and really shore up a second pair. Like all of a sudden, like they look good, and they look
kind of good.
They look like last year. There's no doubt, and Stephen, you and I kind of went over this earlier before the call about like the amount of points that they were a one-line team last year.
Mm-hmm.
They, between the three of them, Lindholm, Gaudreau, and Tkachuk, they put up 301 points.
I want to
that
Calgary defense is really solid. Chris Tanev is so much better than you think he is. Like he has very quietly been one of the best defensive defensemen for the last 3 or 4 years. Like he's been really, really solid. And they had Shillington emerge last year as a legitimate puck moving kind of playmaking defenseman. Then you've got, like you said, Hanifin and Anderson, and then they had Zadorov and Goodbranson who were playing above their head, right? Who, because of Daryl Sutter's style, they were able to play above their head. And I think the thing
in case you're playing to take people's heads off.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the reason they were able to get away with being a one-line team is because top to bottom, they had a very strong defense. Jacob Markstrom is a really good goaltender, and they have maybe the best coach in the league who plays a defensive style. So, it's a weird thing because, you don't want to ascribe to them more offensive talent than they have, but you don't want to take away from the fact that while that offensive talent isn't there, they kind of have proof of concept already of their ability, in the bottom six, to be effective. And that's really one of the hallmarks of Daryl Sutter is everybody buys into that system, everybody gets going. And now you just, we were talking about the numbers before, Ed, and even though, with Lindholm, Tkachuk, and Gaudreau together, and Calgary had 60% of the expected goals. With those three off the ice, for as much as they were a one-line team, they still had almost 55% of the expected goals at 5-on-5. So, they're generating chances. It's just whether or not the talent is going to be there.
Yeah, I think they're deeper now too. So if they can continue to play that way, then it bodes well that they won't be a one-line team this year because it's going to be if you project it's Huberdeau, Lindholm, Toffoli, that will be the top line, and they'll get it done offensively just because Huberdeau and Lindholm are exceptional. I think Toffoli fits that line as maybe the shooter, right? And then now you've got a second line that isn't centered by Backlund and is a major drop-off. You've got Kadri down there with Mangiapane, who had 35 goals last year, and Coleman.
Magpie.
Okay.
That's what I call him.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll add
Redman?
Magpie.
Yeah, no, he was the second bread man, right? Because it was his
Yeah.
name
Mangiapane
literally
means
eat bread. But you're deeper with those guys on the second line. You've got a more suitable matchup with that second line, where it's not like, okay, we're gonna rely on this top line to get it done 90% of the time, and we're gonna roll out a line that can still, like you said, contribute offensively when you look at the underlying numbers, but they lack that finishing ability. Okay, now you've got Kadri to play with Mangiapane, and maybe that helps Coleman get going. And Backlund slides down to a third line center role, so now you've got Lindholm, Kadri, Backlund down the middle, so that puts you a little bit deeper there. And you still got Dubé and maybe Lucic or Pelche on that third line. So I feel like that fits Sutter more than what he was able to do with that team last year, in that he's got a few lines he can roll over the boards and continue to play that style.
Yeah, I think he's done Calgary has done a great job of replacing what they lost and solidifying between down the center line, and then also increasing their defense defense productivity, but also not losing anything there. And then their goaltender Markstrom's going to be just as good. So this team, I don't think it seemed like they lost a crap load, and then they absolutely gained it back, and then they gained a better matchup for most of the teams they're going to have to play against. And then add into that the division that they're in. Division sucks.
Yeah, still
it sucks, and they're going to do just fine because literally, I guess at this point, it's kind of them and Edmonton. I don't see too many other challengers to that prowess.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to mention here is they also made the trade. They traded Monahan out to create the cap space to bring in Kadri, or I think they might still actually have cap space. I think it was more of just doing like an offset of cost or whatever. But now, like Jay said, they've got 3 guys who are legitimately above average defensive centers now. And they lost a little bit of dynamism, I think. As far as like Kadri isn't as offensively special as Matthew Tkachuk is, which is obvious because that's one of the reasons Matthew Tkachuk is because he is that very special offensive talent. But like you said, Jay, like if you're looking at Edmonton, you can go 1 through 3 against 1 through 3, and it's still McDavid and Draisaitl. But if you're matching those two with Lindholm and Kadri, and then you have Backlund going up against Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, like you're going to be in as good a spot as any team to survive, that. And that's really, like you said, who you have to think you're beating, right? Because Vegas, I think, is still a legit contender, but they have the cold goalie question. And until they solve it, it's an issue. LA is better, but I don't think, I don't know 100% sure if like LA is going to be able to take that next step. But as far as like, the teams with the most clear path to a Western Conference final, I think it's those two.
Sorry.
And
yeah, I'm sorry. You're laughing so hard.
We just
Eddie.
there's a breaking news, and I kind of wish we were talking about the Golden Knights tonight. But Phil Kessel just signed for the Vegas Golden Knights, and I love that so much.
Did he really?
He signed a 1-year. Phil Kessel signed a 1-year, $1.5 million deal with Vegas. that guy is just gonna be absolutely destroyed halfway through the season. There's no way he's gonna last in Vegas.
I know they have too many hot dogs.
Dude, he's like super low key. He's actually probably gonna be perfectly fine.
He's fine, and he's doing the exact same thing Klingberg did with the Ducks. He's gonna sign, get traded to a contender,
You don't think
because
they'll be
Vegas
a
is
contender? You don't. Another day. We're talking about
maybe.
Calgary.
Well, I mean, we'll get to them later
Yeah.
when we do the rest. We do the rest of the division. But
Vegas is Vegas, but
I think, yeah, like to your point, Jay, I do think as much as they did lose, obviously, so much of their identity, they did get as close to they were going to get to replicating it, both stylistically, and production wise, right? Because, like you said, Gaudreau is, an incredible playmaker on the wing, but the thing with Huberdeau is he's not 5'9", and that just gives him more versatility down low and to do the cycle and kind of Daryl Sutter-like things. So, they'll need Mangiapane to pop, and Toffoli has to find his form again. But
Kadri's like what Eddie said. Kadri's kind of like that Kachuk
mm-hmm.
interface. Like, I mean, it's like you're still going to have that agitator. That guy's going to get in somebody's face and be annoying,
mm-hmm.
but still pop in some goals. Maybe not 42 like Kachuk did, but I mean enough to be a nuisance. And definitely, if that's your second line center and he can get anywhere close to 42, you haven't lost a whole lot in that mindset, if you're looking at that aspect of it.
You're hoping that gets mitigated by Toffoli having over 25, Huberdeau getting into 30, Lindholm getting to 30, Kadri hopefully getting 25 to 30, Mangiapane
Magpie
close to what he had last year, and maybe Blake Coleman gets around 20 to 25. And if you've got 3 or 4 guys over 30 and another 2 or 3 guys over 20, you're doing fine. And I think they have the roster and the ability to do that, as well as 3 guys who from the back end who can put up 45 to 50 points in Hanifin, Anderson, and Uyghur. But they present like such a weird way to build a team when you look at that roster now, right? Like the only guys drafted by the team are Mangiapane, Dubé, Backlund. If Pelche makes the team, then him, and then Anderson and Chillington on the back end, and everybody else is brought in via trade or free agency. I know they kind of got dumped into that because before this, last year Monahan, Gaudreau, Kachuk were on this team and they were drafted by this team. So they did kind of get dumped into that situation that if they were going to be competitive,
double birds as they went away.
But it is wild. Like I mean, I would never say this is a blueprint you ever want to follow and go down this road to build a team.
No, but if you happen to find yourself on said road and you're able to pull yourself back onto the main road and make this work, I think you got an amazing goalie in there. Your identity was still being able to be one of the, I think, top 3 offensive teams last year as far as goals scored, and one of the 6 best defensive teams as far as goals against. And then you kind of increased your ability to defend by adding Uyghur onto there. So, as bad as this could have been, and this looked like it was going downhill fast, they absolutely righted the ship, got right back onto the hill, and all right, we're trying to go back to the mountain. We're gonna get there.
So, I guess here's a question that I have: is are we all on board that the Huberdeau extension was a good decision, or where do we stand on? Where do you guys stand on that?
Do you mean, was it a good financial decision, or was it a good decision, I don't know, for the franchise? Because I feel like the franchise felt like we just got screwed by what would have been our franchise player and our backup franchise player. They both bolted. We got this guy and we signed him to a lucrative long-term deal. Calgary's a place to be, because I think that's what they kind of said was, hey, Calgary's not a shit place to play in. Like, it's not bad. Everyone's leaving, but it's not really that bad. And I feel bad for our fans. And then they got the trade. They got this dude for long term. They got the next dude for long term. They signed Kadri for long term. It's like, all right, people are committed to Calgary. Calgary's not a shit city. That's what I felt like. They almost felt like was like, we're a shit city. That's what it feels like when these people leave, and everyone's like, oh wow, no one wants to play Calgary. Yeah. So from a city standpoint, great. From a team standpoint, still good. They were going to sign those guys one way or the other. It's either those guys or these guys, and these guys kind of add up on paper to those guys.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like I think They had to. Like, you have to fucking sign him. You can't let him walk if you're trading Matthew Tkachuk for him. Like, you're trying to stay competitive. You got to bring this guy back. The contract, no matter where Huberdeau signed it, Florida and Calgary, was always going to suck. It was always going to be 7 or 8 years at that amount, and it's going to be a shitty deal near the end of it. It just is. He's going to be 37, 38, or maybe not, but there's a high chance that the last 2 to 3 years of that deal are not going to be great, and he's not going to be worth the $10.5 million. But you have to do it. Like, you have no choice, because
what you would have done with Gaudreau.
Yeah, and what you would have,
and
what
the same result.
Tkachuk and Gaudreau would have signed, massive long-term deals. Both of those two combined probably would have been around the same, if not more, combined than what Huberdeau and Kadri end up making. And you have to give these, like, the Kadri contract is not a great contract either. You could argue it's just as bad, at only being $7 million, but he's 2 years older than Huberdeau. And so he's going to be 38 as well, I think, when that contract is over. So they're both going to be, it's not going to be a great contract at the end of those 2 years, but you go into that knowing this. Like, Brad Treliving doesn't sign these contracts knowing, expecting them to be good in the final 2 years. At that point, you're hoping you've won a Stanley Cup at that point, and it's all been worth it. But if your whole goal here, which is obvious that it was, is to make this trade and still be competitive, then you've got to make these signings, and there's
a window, and they're trying to hit it.
Yeah,
so
you can look at.
Felt like they just got into it, and they kind of got screwed, but they weren't going to leave it.
Yeah.
So they still have that window. It's going to suck after that window, but they had to try and hit that.
Well, yeah, and the thing, the point where they are right now, you had two choices because of their prospect pool. It's bare outside of maybe 3 players. You either burn it to the ground and you trade everybody. Like, Mangiapane probably would have had to go. Lindholm would have had to go. You could argue Hannafin and Anderson would have been on their way out. Markstrom, like, you would have had to just burn it down. Maybe not all in one season, but over the next couple of years, and restock the cupboards. And that's going to take 4 or 5 years. Or you try and be competitive. You sign these guys knowing down the road it's not going to look great. You've got 3 prospects in Zari, Pelche, and Coronado who can come up and hopefully supplement the roster on entry-level contracts and maybe extend that window a little bit longer. Then you make that. Then that's your choice. And this is what ends up coming out of this, is you've got to sign these guys to long-term deals. You can't just sign Huberdeau, because that's not going to be enough. You had to go out and get Kadri, and he's going to want a lot of money. And to compete with the Islanders and Colorado and other teams out there, you've got to offer him the 7 years, and you've got to offer him probably the most money out of anybody out there to convince him to come there, right? And I have no issues with these contracts regarding the situation. Like, in a vacuum, they both suck. But somebody was going to sign them to this deal, right? The Islanders were going to sign Kadri to a deal similar to this. Florida would have signed Huberdeau to a deal similar to this. If he had got traded to Montreal, they would have signed him to a deal similar to what he got. They were always going to get these deals. And for Calgary, out of probably more than any other team right now, it made sense for them to give these contracts out.
It's funny, like, go, Jay.
I'm not going to say anything profound, but they were literally this close to kind of being like, wow, where the hell did Calgary come from? And look at how great they are. And then they were this close to going like, oh, crap, they lost it all. They were doing so well. They made it so far in the playoffs. They fell to Edmonton pretty quick. But you're sitting there, you're like, wow, Calgary's there. They got the players. They got the talent. Everything should be there. And then all of a sudden, everything left. And then you're just sitting there going like, well, crap, everything that they had is now falling off. And so I guess from a management or a city perspective too, but management mostly was like, we can't go from like, oh my God, we're actually legitimate. We have a great window where we don't have to compete with the Anaheims, the Kings, the Sharks, everybody else who we've kind of failed against in past years. Now we're the top dog, and we should be in there. And now all of a sudden we just lost everybody. So, like Ed said, in that circumstance, you got to go like, we can't just go like, well, flame out and we're done. No pun intended. But it's just like, hey, we did it. Hey, we're here. Oh, no, everyone's gone. All right, cool. All right, bye. We're gonna go back down to the cellar. So it's kind of like, hey, listen, we were starting our dynasty or our window, and we can't just fail after the first year. So they had to, in my opinion, and like Ed said, just they couldn't just let it pass by without trying to get those guys back, or at least some version of them back.
If anything, they have a more direct window now because Kadri and Huberdeau and Uyghur and even the rest of the roster and Lindholm, and they're all around the same age. So you've now,
I guess, with the exception of Kachuk, like Kachuk would have been your guy.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Going forward.
Yeah.
That would have been a guy you could build the entire franchise around.
I think losing Goodrow and keeping Kachuk, you almost have to enter into the rebuild at that point. Because I think if you keep Kachuk, you don't really you can still get Kadri, but then that feels a little bit weird. It's like if you keep Kachuk around, he's 24. The rest of this roster is getting a little bit older. Without another young piece to replace Goodrow with, you would have to get another young player in to kind of supplement that. And the only trade chip you have is Matthew Tkachuk, right? So not to say like I would, in every scenario, I'd rather have Matthew Tkachuk, but for the Flames, when you look at the rest of their roster, if they had kept it as is, in 3 years, they would have been facing a scenario where Tkachuk is still in his prime and everybody else is kind of starting to get to this point where, all right, like the window is near over here. And now what are we going to do with Matthew Tkachuk? You can trade him at that point, sure. But I do like the composition of the roster here where they now understand we've got 4 or 5 years here to really take a run at it with everybody on this roster. Everybody's around that age where they all kind of have about 4 or 5 years to really make a run with this core. Everybody's, to the most part, is locked down for that period of time. Lindholm will need a new contract, but they'll have enough money to do that. But everybody seems to be locked in for at least the next 3 to 4 years to be able to make that run, including Markstrom, where you can really
given this division, they got an opportunity to essentially get in and go further than that first or second round.
It's better time than any when the only, like you said, the only real competition you have is Edmonton. Kings will be better, but I wouldn't put them at that level. Vegas is having their own issues. The Ducks are on their way up, so is Seattle, but they're not going to be there yet. And you've got some real bad teams like San Jose that are going to be out of the mix as well. So
I love hearing that. Say it again.
Yeah, they're just it's awful. So yeah, no, you know what? Like, I give Brad Treliving some credit for having the balls to go out and get this done because he recognized the situation.
It could have been a disaster.
Yeah, you recognize the situation you're in here. If you go for the rebuild here. And when you're out of that rebuild and you've maybe stocked the coverage, you're now potentially facing an Anaheim team that is stocked and ready to go, a LA team that has all their young prospects in the middle of their roster, potentially a rebuilt San Jose team, a Seattle team with Beniers and Wright down the middle, with 3 or 4 years of NHL experience. Like it looks bleak at that point when you look at the teams that have already built for the next 4 or 5 years to be competitive. This is your window now. Take advantage of the fact that everybody else sucks right now, and you can really be that team in the Pacific to push it. Because if you are the best team in that division, the way the playoff format is right now, you almost booked yourself a free trip to the Western Conference Final in some cases, right? So, yeah, man, I give them some credit because it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to sit there and say, hey, man, we're losing these 2 players, and I'm going to go out and make this better.
They lost 2 franchise players in one offseason. Replaced them with legitimate people. Maybe not franchise players, but definitely guys point-wise or statistic-wise match up with what you lost.
I'm not going to go out and say he's GM of the year by any means, but and these acquisitions might not work out, but to have the balls to go out and do that and make those moves and not move Matthew Tkachuk for futures to go out and find a player like Huberdeau available and make that move. There's a high chance that ultimately it works out a lot better for Florida than Calgary, but to take the swing and the chance that, to recognize the situation you're in and the scenario of the league and that division to go for it, I like it. I give them credit for it.
That's going to be crazy when Florida and Calgary meet in the finals.
I would love that. I would love to see that, honestly.
I mean, I'm not saying it's gonna, but when it does, oh my god,
that would rock. Yeah, I think.
Steven,
it's interesting.
one of those rare scenarios where it's not just me and Steven talking for 25 minutes.
You guys want to talk about Thundercats?
Yes.
What?
I mean, the thing that's interesting, right, is they have Milan Lucic is an expiring contract this year, and he makes $5 million, and like he has almost he's a full no move and a modified no trade list of 10 teams he can be traded to. And I'm sure, if they ask him or whatever, he would probably acquiesce. But like, that's an interesting thing to have, the availability to kind of like leverage, right? Because like they don't have, they have most of their picks. They picked up the extra Florida one down the road. And, like, since they are so clearly in a win now mode, what are they willing to do with those picks I guess that'll be the question, right? Is are they going to try to thread the needle and hold on to the picks kind of similar to what Anaheim did? Or are they going to go more Detroit, Pittsburgh and just be like, look, at best, we get a player who's pretty good in 3 years. Fuck that. Let's just move these picks and let's really take some big swings because they have the core to do it. And they're locked into, at the very least, Kadri, Huberdeau, and Markstrom. And I think it's safe to say Anderson as well, for the next 4 or 5 years. So at that point, it's better to make sure you extend Weegar and really see how aggressive you can be in making trades and moving people around.
Yeah, I think they're definitely going to Pittsburgh it, whether it's moving that first-round pick at the deadline. It all kind of depends on how the team's doing, what they need, and what they feel they need at that point. I imagine what they're going to end up needing is another top 6 winger. I don't see Blake Coleman being that guy, and Toffoli will be a top 6 winger on that team, but is he better suited to play with Kadri and Mangiapane, or will he work out with Lindholm and Huberdeau? I think they need another right winger.
I think he would be better.
Kessel.
Yeah. Kessel at the deadline from Vegas, right?
Yeah. I think he would make a lot of sense if he were to go to Toffoli would make a lot of sense on that second line with Kadri and Mangiapane than up with Lindholm and Huberdeau.
That's what I think they do at the deadline, and that's probably a point where either that 2023 first or that 2024 first, one of them's getting burned at the deadline, I think, for a top 6 winger. But a lot of it depends on, I think, Pelche as well, right? Like, he could come up, had a great season in the AHL last year. If he comes up and just really works out for them and he jumps into the top 6, that they might not need that. But it's going to be one of those conversations like any team when it comes down to the deadline. Where are they at? What do they need? What's the biggest need they need to address? But just looking at the roster right now, I think it's going to be that winger. But they could easily go and go through the deadline, not move that, move a prospect instead, draft a player in the 2023 draft, and in a couple of years' time, when Lucic's contract is gone, Backlund's contract is gone, and you've got the cap space to go out and trade for a player, that maybe you flip those prospects at that point. And Pittsburgh's done that in the past too, where they've drafted guys and then ended up moving on from them in a similar trade piece as a draft pick would be, but just trading the prospect out for help down the road. So they could do either or, but I imagine one of those picks is gone at the deadline for some help, because they are a very good team and they've done a good job of, making themselves better from the significant losses they had. But when you stack them up with Colorado and Tampa Bay and, even, some of the top teams in the East of Carolina, the Rangers, I feel like there's still one piece off of being in the same realm as those teams. And if you're really going for it like they are, you're going to need to add somebody to that mix.
So here's my question, Ed.
I'm here too.
I saw that one.
You're not going to have heard of the person I'm talking about.
I'll just sit over here, but you talk to Ed.
No.
For another 2 hours.
What do you think the odds are that Connor Zary can step in and play a meaningful role on this team?
Oh, that's a question for Ed, not me.
I think there's more of a chance of a role for Jacob Pelletier, like I said, because he's a winger, and there's a spot for him in the top 9 right now to go out and play. But I think depending on the season that Zary has, that he will have a chance to get in there. Didn't have a great year in Stockton, 25 points in 53 games, whereas Phillips and Pelletier had over 60 points. So it's going to be tough. I don't think, similar to what we've been talking with the Ducks, like, you don't want these guys to come up and play fourth line, right? You don't want them to come up and play fourth line minutes and play 9-10 minutes a night. It's not beneficial, I think, for him. And you'll want him, he's a center, you're going to want him to play down the middle. Now with Lindholm, Kadri, Backlund, there's just unless there's an injury, there's no way he gets in there.
See, so my thinking is, I wonder if he moves up, Coleman moves down, and now what you've got is, I know that he's a center, but if he can fill in on that left-hand side there and be, a competent left wing with more scoring upside than Blake Coleman has, I wonder if, because basically what I'm asking is like, what are the odds Connor Zary solves their scoring depth issue?
Yeah, he could.
And I understand that it's a small percentage just because
issue.
Yes, they can only score from about 4 or 5 feet away. They need to be able to score from about 8 or 9.
Okay, but they were what? They were 3rd or 6th in goal scoring.
Yeah, well, Eddie has numbers on this.
That's what I thought they were. They were either I can't remember. I think they were 3rd in goal scoring.
Yeah, so
obviously behind Florida.
This is the problem with that is, okay, we can look on paper and say Huberdeau and Kadri are going to fill that. What Calgary ultimately was last year was a one-line team. 301 points came from that top line. The rest of the forwards on every forward on that team that played any games at all for Calgary last year combined scored 267 points. The entire team, including defensemen, scored 472 points to the top line's 301. So the Flames forwards, the top line, I think it was like 55%, had 55% of the offense among the forwards. They had about 39% of the entire team offense last year. So that one of those guys remains. So you
Lindholm, which was 42 goals, tied with Tkachuk for team lead.
Right. And I love Elias Lindholm. I think he's a great player. If you had to pick one guy to have been a passenger in some sense on that line and to not maybe put up the same numbers without those two guys around him next year, for me it would be Elias Lindholm. And I love him. I think he's going to be a great player. If anybody,
if you add a Huberdeau,
fair to say it's a goal scorer.
But if you add a Huberdeau to that top line, and a Toffoli, are you saying that he could not reach 40 goals next season? Because I don't feel like they necessarily lost a lot of offensive production by adding Huberdeau there, much like Huberdeau didn't necessarily score a ton of goals, but he set up a lot of goals, hence why he got to 115 points last season, that he couldn't set up a Lindholm and then have Toffoli as also a finisher on that top line.
Yeah.
So they could still have a legitimate top one line with a Kadri on the second line, providing maybe that Tkachuk bullishness in front on power plays and what have you, any sort of, second line matchup where he's just going to be the a-hole that everyone has to deal with.
I think you're going to have to hope that bread and butter comes from the power play for Lindholm and Huberdeau and Kadri playing together. You would want that power play is going to need to be top 5 in the league for them to continue to put up the same amount of points as last year. The thing.
Well, here's the other thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say is the thing about Lindholm, I think saying passenger is maybe
it's
a little wrong because he's a very strong two-way player. I think what it is fair to say is you would expect a goal regression from Lindholm. He probably isn't going to be a 42 goal scorer. And as much as Toffoli is capable of being a top 6 winger, he is not going to draw the same amount of attention as Matthew Tkachuk. Lindholm was the third option on that line as far as who you had to be worried about in your own zone. That gave him a lot of freedom to play and capitalize. And I think as much as the balancing is going to improve by having Kadri step down into that second line role, I do think it would be as much as Huberdeau is a great playmaker, like you're saying, I still think that it's more likely that Lindholm finishes under 30 than over 30.
He's never scored over 30 in his career. He scored 42.
Other than last year.
42 last year. The other times he had over 20 was just twice with 27 and 29. He would have had over 20 the season prior to this because he had 19 and 56 games.
What team was he on prior to coming to Calgary? Was it Carolina?
Yeah, so his 3 seasons in Calgary, or 4, he had 27 goals, 29 goals, 19 and 56 games, and then 42 last year. So he's better in Calgary. He's a better player in Calgary. He's going to score 25 to 30 goals. To say he's going to do 40 again is a major stretch for a guy who's done 40 just last year. And I agree, like Huberdeau is going to set him up, and that's why he's still going to likely score above 30. I think there's a major drop-off from Tkachuk to Toffoli, and Toffoli is going to take some of those goals, so there's going to be some more goals on Toffoli's side of things. So I think Lindholm will likely finish in 30 and 35. That's a really good year from him. I think there might be a bit more assists there where you're still looking at a guy who could put up 70, 80 points. It's just that they're going to need some depth, I think, beyond that, because Lindholm will be fine. Huberdeau will be fine. Toffoli is a question mark on whether he is actually going to score 25 to 30 goals. Coleman is a major question mark. And again, like I mentioned before, he's not maybe ideal as your second line winger. You'd like him on maybe the third with Backlund and Dubé. So they're missing some depth there of real quality goal scorers. Mangiapane is a major question mark of a guy that he scored 35 last year, and can he do that again? We're talking like Raquel territory, right? As a guy who went from 15, 16 goals, jumped to 30. Can he do it again? Maybe. I don't know. We'll have to see. So I think there is a depth scoring issue there when you lose. You're losing a guy who's going to score 40 in Lindholm. He's probably not going to do it again. You're losing a guy who scored 40 in Matthew Tkachuk. You're losing, Goodrow had how many goals last year? Was it close to 40?
40, close to 40.
So you had three guys over 40 next year, and now you're saying you might have one guy over 40, and that's Lindholm. Nobody else on that team is scoring 40. So you're definitely, there is a bit of a depth scoring problem there where I think they've gotten deeper, and there'll be more scoring from other lines, but you're not having those guys.
They're evening it out, and then you also throw in the fact that it's Daryl Sutter, and Daryl Sutter is not exactly, let's explode offensively and F the goalie and defense. That's not his style. It's pretty much, hey, let's do that, but from the back end. Let's solidify this and then get our chances moving forward. So you probably have a little bit of drop off, but I think you also probably moving forward are a little bit more solidified on defense and on goaltending. So I guess I'm not as concerned that they're going to lose, that high quality or that high number of goals between the Tkachuks and the Goudreaus of what was the season that just was. But they're going to even it out, and they're going to solidify defense, and then that's how they're going to be, A, better team throughout the season, and B, a much better team in the playoffs that can maybe compete against your Edmontons or, it's still a long shot, but against your Colorados and things like that. But
yeah, and I think, like what you were saying before, Stephen, with some of the prospects coming up and adding to that goal scoring depth, I think Pelletier could potentially be that guy. Like he'll get the shot because of the year he had in Stockton. So if he becomes a 20 goal guy, you've replaced some goal scoring there with that. Mm-hmm. If Adam Ruzicka plays up in the lineup, he had I think 11 goals in 56 games last year, so he could be a guy that could get close to 20. Dylan Dubé had 18 last year. Can he improve on that and get over 20 as well? Zari is a long shot, but if he comes up, Matthew Phillips could come up and replace if Backlund gets injured or one of the centers gets injured or even just comes up and plays wing. Like he's another guy who had a great year in Stockton and has only played one game with the Flames. So there are some guys that they could call up in the short term next year that will help with that and that are ready to kind of make waves and get called up because they've dominated the AHL level, and it's a logical next step for them with not having a ton of depth on the wings for the Flames for them to hop into that lineup. And again 2 years from now you've got Matthew Coronado who will come out of the NCAA and jump into that lineup. So things are shaping up for the Flames to have those young guys jump into the lineup. This will be the first year kind of test of that, which will, for me, make the difference from them being a pretty good team and one of the best Pacific Division teams on paper to them potentially being one of the best teams in the National Hockey League, is those young players stepping in the lineup and how well they do. And then the seasons from Mangiapane and Elias Lindholm, how similar are they going to be to last year? Can they keep that up? Or can they both get over 30 goals and be key contributors? Because they're going to need that from them.
I got a quick question. I want to find out from both of you and myself, where do you see Calgary offensively, like if you were to rank them in the Pacific Division, offensive-wise?
Probably.
Do you mean talent? Or do you
no,
mean guessing total goals
where
at
they
the end
will
of the year?
finish. Like, I mean, will they finish as the top a top offensive team scoring the most goals within the Pacific Division? Because I would have them as number one still. Vegas might be that other one.
Edmonton's number one
Edmonton,
for me.
I take that back.
A full
Edmonton
season of Evander Kane, obviously Draisaitl, McDavid. Edmonton will be, for me, the number one goal scoring team just because of the small drop offs we mentioned from Calgary. I would still put Calgary at number two. I think they'd be above Vegas because, again, a full season of Eichel maybe will help, but you lost 30 goals in Pacioretty.
And I don't know what Stone's doing. So
yeah,
I think you can make a legitimate argument for putting them fourth.
Vegas?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No,
Calgary.
Calgary.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I think it's fair to say that Vancouver offensively has more
that's
talent. That's what I
was going to put in there, yeah.
And I think under Boudreau, they will score goals. I could see Edmonton and Vancouver, even if Vancouver finishes fourth or fifth in the division, I could see them being second in goals. Mm-hmm. And I think adding Fiala and Todd McClellan's system, I think there's a chance, especially if, Byfield or Kupari or any of those kids comes up and really pops, like they're going to have a chance. They've got offensive depth. So I think for me, they would be pushing for fourth with Vegas.
I just can't see the Kings adding 50 goals to their roster to jump up to 290 that Edmonton had last year. Like, Edmonton will score that, if not more, this year. I think they didn't really lose anybody.
But they added Fiala. You don't think Fiala's worth 50 goals?
No.
But here's the thing. Here's what I'll say. He's probably 35-ish goals on his own, but he's also a good playmaker. You don't think he can find 15 or 20 goals, or do you think that just kind of falls into the lump sums of the others?
Yeah, I think there'll be some regressions and some jump. Yeah. So I think they'll probably add 20 to 30 goals as a team, and they could sit I think they'll be in that mix. For me, I think Edmonton is clear, and then there is that mix of LA, Vegas, Vancouver, Calgary that could be in that 240 to 260 goals range, depending on health and how guys do and regression of some guys and good seasons from other guys, that they'll be in that mix. I think the only team that, for me, on paper has that 290 goal potential like they did last year in the Pacific is Edmonton. Just because, again, you're going to have McDavid, you have Draisaitl. Those are locks for 40-plus goals for both of them. You've got Evander Kane in that mix who should be 30 to 40 goals right there. And we just talked about the Flames having, 3 40-plus goal scorers. I think Edmonton, you could argue they have a better chance more than anybody to potentially have 3 guys score 50 in McDavid, Draisaitl, and Evander Kane if things went right. So I feel like just pure firepower side of things, Edmonton is probably up there as just the more likely team to lead the Pacific in goal scoring. But then there's a major mix there because Calgary is maybe my favorites to be number 2, but I think Vancouver is right there, and then Vegas and LA are kind of right behind it for me. So if I had to pick my top 3, it's probably Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, but I wouldn't be surprised to see LA or see Vegas in that mix. There's just a few question marks with those teams that kind of puts them a little bit lower for me.
Well, what about the defensive side of things? Out of all of those teams in the Pacific Division, where do you rank Calgary defensively?
Yeah, it's number one again for me.
I was going to say,
one?
second at worst.
They were significantly better than any team in the Pacific Division defensively last year. They were the best defensive team, I think, in the National Hockey League, right?
Now, were they that great because they were so awesome on offense, and now that offense is regressed and as dominant offensively, so that defense might be a little bit more exposed to, say, wearing out?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would say for that is maybe not so much the offense. I think, less goals is gonna hurt you a little bit defensively and staying in some tighter games and whatever. For me, the big loss is losing Matthew Tkachuk as a defensive asset on your team. And how do you replace that? And what do you do to overcome that? But I think Huberdeau and Kadri are good enough defensively to fit in the system. I also think the depth in the matchups that they can now throw out there, that will help them. And it's a Daryl Sutter coach team. Like, they're going to be good defensively. Not only that, you've added Mackenzie Weegar to the blue line, which makes them better. And Jacob Markstrom is going to be good again next year as well, in a team that is coached the way they are.
I'm not talking about goalies.
Well, he's part of the. We're talking about their defensively as a team. When you look at everybody else, can Edmonton be better with Campbell? Sure, but are they going to shed 50 goals against to get in the same realm that Calgary was last year? Probably not. I think Vegas will be worse defensively. With no goaltender right now. I don't.
I think the one thing.
I'm available.
Yeah, it's Vancouver for me.
The one thing with Vegas. I think the one thing with Vegas is they do have Bruce Cassidy, who's a very good coach. So if they can get an adequate goaltender, I think there's a chance that they can ride it out and be a very good two-way team. That being said, I think Calgary, as big as the drop-off from Matthew Tkachuk to Tyler Toffoli is offensively, I think the improvement of Monahan to Kadri as a third center is just as significant. And I think, like you guys said, based on matchups, based on Daryl Sutter, I think there is an opportunity for them to be a better team overall, but there is an expectation that the defense as a whole will improve to make up for what is, I believe, a pretty significant loss in offensive talent.
Neat. So where do you guys feel that the goaltending is going to fall as far as Markstrom goes? Do you think Markstrom is in this division, or is it good? Because it's obviously between those two.
He's in the best situation. He's in the best situation of any goaltender to succeed, because what John Gibson has in front of him is nowhere near as defensively capable of what Calgary has in front of him. Jack Campbell, maybe. Edmonton's defense is better, but they're not better than Calgary. And again, Vancouver. I really like the Vancouver. I just hate again, like Anaheim. The defense in front of Demko is a nightmare with Tyler Myers and Oliver Ekman-Larsson.
Why isn't anyone talking about Demko wanting to be traded? It's all about Gibson wanting to be traded. It's like there's a lot of fucking great goalies out there that are in front of shit teams, but no one's talking about them. Yeah, it's just Gibson.
There's a lot of good goaltenders in the Pacific Division.
There are.
Are there really?
Legit. I mean, as far as you're entering my realm. As far as technicality and how they play, because there's a difference between how you play technically and how your team plays. And certain goalies will be great with a loosey-goosey type defense and offense, and then that guy just survives. I mean, your Marc-Andre Fleury survives in those situations, but your John Gibsons will survive for half of season and then get completely worn out if you don't tighten up defense. So, I mean, there is that, but like your Demkos, your Markstroms, and your Gibsons are top technical goalies. So if you surround them with semi decent defense and a good structure, these guys will survive anywhere. If you are flawed, you're screwed. And I don't care who you put in there. Maybe Fleury buys you a couple of seasons. That's it. Otherwise, you become the Vegas that is Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's as many good. Like, I think Jacob Markstrom, Thatcher Demko are the only two goalies outside of Anaheim that I would be comfortable going into a season with personally. I don't trust Grubauer. Vegas, they don't have like.
Grubauer
I think
is gone, right?
you could
No,
make.
he's there. I thought he was gone too.
Oh,
Grubauer's in Seattle, right?
Yeah, he's in Seattle.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, yeah.
So I wouldn't do that. I don't like Jonathan Quick or Cal Peterson. Jack Campbell, I'm not all that interested in. San Jose has Kakinen, I guess, and and like fine, but like they're not.
But not behind
Reimer's,
that team.
Reimer's fine. Like Reimer in Anaheim would be great because he's just a perfectly fine goaltender and is fine. He's going to be good for San Jose, but he's not.
Stolarz is better than Reimer, but
yeah,
like it's
This is my thing with the question though is like, yes, it's on individual goaltenders, but some teams are just built horribly in front of them, right? Like, again, we could all sit here and probably say John Gibson is the best goaltender in this division, but the defense in front of him is nowhere near what Calgary has in front of him. And I would say, like, I agree with you where Jack Campbell's a bit of a wild card. I think there's a chance he could succeed there, but the problem is the defense in front of him still has a lot of question marks on whether they can actually get it done. Allowed 252 goals against last year, which was one of the worst in that division outside of the bottom three teams in that division. So can they be better this year with a capable goaltender? Maybe. Like, how much does Jack Campbell help that number, right? Versus Koskinen and Mike Smith last year, who both weren't really that great. Does he help them? Does he shed 20 goals off that number? Did they defensively get better with Broberg, right? Like, who knows? But I think when you look at it, like, you have to say a team with a plus 85 goal differential last year, Markstrom has the best chance to be the best goaltender from this division. I don't see anybody really facing him unless somehow out of nowhere Vancouver's defense, it just turns things around and looks exceptional. I would put Demko as the most likely option to be there, and it's weird. I have Vancouver as the most likely option to be offensively the second best team in this division, and most likely to be defensively the second best team in this division. But they could easily just suck because they're Vancouver.
Well, right, that's exactly right. Right, like I think the reason that you have Vancouver second is what we've all said, which is that Demko's a really good goaltender.
Yeah.
And the problem is
a great coach too. So
right. The problem is it's Oliver Ekman-Larsson. It's
Tyler
Myers,
Travis Dermott's there now.
Like it's not.
Quinn Hughes cannot play defense.
Right. So, you're looking at a team of guys. Don't they have like Tucker Pullman too?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, dude. Like, it's just Thatcher Demko is not Dominik Hasek because nobody is.
Not with that attitude.
But so like it's just a question of like how high can he pull them? And I don't think Thatcher Demko is Connor Hellebuck, and I don't think he's John Gibson, and I think Connor Hellebuck is pretty special and has shown that. Like Demko would have to put up a Shesterkin-like season to drag Vancouver into the playoffs.
Not gonna happen. So
yeah. So like you're 100% right that like it feels weird to say that you trust Vancouver's goal.
So Markstrom
most, but the defense is the issue.
So Markstrom's gonna be the top goalie out of the Pacific Division, right?
Yeah.
I think that
It'd be hard to pick anybody else.
Yeah.
It'll be I think the top three goalies are him, Demko, and Gibby.
All right. So best goaltending, semi-best defense, and anywhere from fourth to second best offense. Yep. Calgary's likely in the playoffs,
and likely best team
going a little bit further past the first round. Maybe get to the third round, but then ultimately get curb stomped by Colorado.
Any of the top three in the Central.
Any other team not in the Pacific Division.
See, I don't know. Like
they are better. I think they have a better chance because I think Colorado got worse and they haven't addressed losing Nazem Kadri. St. Louis
but they have Makar, so they're good.
Minnesota lost Fiala. Like, Nashville doesn't really have a ton of talent.
Yeah, Dallas is sort of on the up, but also sort of on the down with Ben and Sagan. Like, it's a weird situation they're in. So like, again,
I think Calgary should expect to make the second
They're
round.
going to get stomped by Edmonton. They will not get past Edmonton, I think.
If that happens, then there's
That's
a problem.
exactly what.
But for me, I think they should expect to get into the second round. They should
against Edmonton
more than not expect to
The
make
third round.
the Western Conference Final. And I don't think it's out of the question to say that they are legitimate Stanley Cup contenders from day one.
They are, but they are in a weak division, and I don't think they're better than Edmonton, and I don't think anyone out of the Pacific Division is going to beat anybody coming out of the Central to get to the Stanley Cup Finals, unless they just hit some insane fun time in a 7-game series in the Western Conference Finals.
Well, again, there's also, I mean, we're talking about this at the beginning of the season, but the deadline we mentioned as well. If Calgary goes out and adds a top 6 forward at the deadline, okay, are they closer to being as competitive with those teams? Potentially, right? We don't know.
I mean, if Edmonton gets me as a goalie, they could go beyond the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah.
I mean, repeat. I mean, it never stops.
Yeah, I think there's they are the best team right now on paper to go the farthest out of the Pacific Division. Edmonton is in that mix, but I have more concerns with them defensively and their goaltending right now to put them above Calgary for me.
First year coach.
Yeah, the one problem I have with Calgary is when you put these numbers in the doc, but them overperforming in both their goals for per 60 and their goals against per 60, where they and it wasn't like it was close. Like, you would hope to see, their goals for per 60 was 2.98. You would hope to see, okay, expected would maybe be around 2.9 and slightly overperformed it. Well, no, their expected goals for per 60 was 2.79, which is still good, but it's a drop off. And we're talking about guys like Lindholm and Mangiapane regressing. Well, the numbers say they probably should next year just based on their expected goals for. Their goals against per 60 was 2.07, but their expected goals against per 60 was 2.25. So does Uyghur, help them out there? For sure. But is there a chance for regression? Well, yeah, the numbers say there are. There always is.
Yeah,
but
basically a half a goal better in total.
Yeah, so if you're talking about the chance for regression there definitely is that from Calgary. And then the adjustment period from losing Goodrow and Tkachuk and that being the identity of your team to roll out this line. Now, all of a sudden, we have to play a different way. We've got a second line with Kadri. We've got a top line with Huberdeau, which in theory is, you're a better matchup team. But now you have to play that. You have to build that into your system, that this is how we're going to generate offense. It's not going to be just these guys. We're going to do it in different ways. That might not work out. I think I would trust Daryl Sutter maybe more than anybody to be able to work that out and be able to get them going. It might take a little bit. They might start off slow, but there are a lot of question marks. I will say that.
They'll kill it under him.
Yeah.
Sutter will get these guys in line immediately, and I assume they'll just kind of run away with it. It'll be fun to watch what happens in the playoffs, and with a Sutter team, quite honestly, this team is probably more built for a Sutter run than the previous one.
Yep,
The previous one kind of got dominated by Edmonton, and quite honestly, it's tough to defend against Edmonton. No matter what kind of coach you are and what kind of team you have, you're going to have a little bit of problem with Edmonton. But this team is probably going to be a little bit more solid to fight Edmonton come playoff time. So
yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. I think it is more of a Sutter team. I think that's a great point, and this is more to what he's used to and being able to roll out kind of at least three different lines, if not four lines, with what Calgary has this year, that all kind of have a bit of everything on them, right? Some skill, some size, defensive ability. You've got at least one of those guys kind of on each line, right, that can do a little bit of everything. So I think this fits what he's looking for. And again, I don't think we can underestimate that blue line. We've talked a lot about the forwards. We've talked a lot about Markstrom and whatever. But Hanifin and Anderson were excellent last year. Both of them nearly had 50 points each. I think Anderson hit 50 points. And then you add Uyghur to that mix. That's there's no superstar defenseman on this team. There's no Makar. So, there's no Hedman or anything like that. But that top four is as solid defensively as maybe any top four in the entire league when you look at Hanifin, Anderson, Uyghur, and Tanev. And then Zadorov and Chillington is not a bad bottom pairing, right, compared to what Edmonton has in Broberg and Cody Ceci, where there's some question marks there. Like, these 6 guys can get it done and are going to get it done. So that is an underrated part of this team. And them being able to match up against teams and shut them down, that they have 4 reliable defensive defensemen, and 3 of them are great puck movers, and Anderson, Hanifin, and Uyghur, and then a really good solid bottom pair that you aren't afraid to throw over there. Like, nobody's messing with Zadorov because you're afraid he's going to take your head off. And then Chillington's proven to be, as you mentioned, Steven, a really good puck distributor and puck mover up the ice. So it's a dangerous blue line. And again, no star power, but if I had to pick any blue line in the Pacific Division, I'd be picking Calgary's. Just when you look at the personnel that they have back there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they should probably finish no lower than second in the Pacific. I think
behind Edmonton,
yeah, them and Edmonton should be the top 2. Like, I don't think really anybody else should sneak into there too much. I guess maybe LA could, but I don't think they have the horses. I guess a weird Ducks centered question would be, who on Anaheim which Anaheim player do you think would make the most sense as a deadline or a trade partner for Calgary?
Klingberg.
Is there
Klingberg?
You think Klingberg?
Does anyone think anybody else? Maybe Shattenkirk? I don't know.
I think Henrique.
I'm sorry. So you're saying Calgary needs another center after Kadri and Lindholm?
Henry could be a winger, I think, in that system.
Henrique doesn't even play center.
He could be a winger, I guess.
I would be on the same page.
Add a Klingberg at a discount, and you could easily shed his contract after your run. Klingberg's got to be it.
I don't think they need another right-handed defenseman, though. They've got 4 right-handed defensemen.
I think if you can shed
they don't have
Zadorov and you can bring in Klingberg, you shed a little bit of salary cap with Zadorov, you bring in Klingberg. I think they don't have that. I really like Rasmus Anderson. I think he can manage a power play.
Mm-hmm.
I think what Klingberg brings is something a little bit different to what they have.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Adam Henrique. I think that'd be a great acquisition from them.
How many more years does Henrique have, though?
He's got
1
2,
more after this
so that's what makes it a little bit tougher.
Not
because
that great.
Well, you
right?
lose
but if
Lucic's
you
salary.
$2 million of it, or if you take Lucic back.
Well, no, I'm saying them losing Lucic's salary allows them for that extension for Huberdeau to not hurt them. I think he's great. I think he could fit.
Him and Max Comtois, to me, are the 2 that make the most sense to Calgary because I don't think they need to fuck with their defense.
But if you get rid of Maxime Comtois, what are we getting back to get rid of?
I would assume
Comtois?
A pick or a prospect. Yeah.
I don't see. For me, I don't see what Comtois does for them. I would rather have Peltier than Comtois for them at this point. I hope player that's growing, it's in their system that you can add into your lineup. I think if you're going out and getting anybody, you want a top 6 forward guaranteed. So it would depend on the year Comtois having. Mm-hmm. Henrique, of the 4s that would be available, would make the most sense, but I don't know if I necessarily like the fit for him in their top 6. I'd be going out and looking for a guy, a goal scorer, a proven goal scorer, to go out and get. Henrique is great, and I think he fits a Sutter team, but I just don't think you need him. I would agree with you. I think Klingberg, for just the dynamic ability that he brings to that back end. Yeah,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I totally interrupted. Go ahead.
No, I just think probably what you're gonna say is you can get those guys elsewhere, and get that production from somewhere in your lineup. I think John Klingberg, they don't have that, and we just talked up their blue line and how it's great and it's one of the best in the league and the division, but they have enough capable guys back there that to add a dynamic puck-moving defenseman like John Klingberg, I think just brings a little bit something different to their team that I think could be really beneficial. And you pair him with a Tanev or a Weegar that will allow him to kind of go out and do that. We're talking about who's the best option from Anaheim. There's not a lot of options of guys who would be available. So if you had to pick one guy, and I think the 1 year thing helps as well, is that with Henrique, it is tough for them, to fit that, maybe that second year, even a little bit retained on that, that cap hit that they really only have $2 million in space already and have to make way for a lot of these extensions. So Klingberg makes the most sense, but I could see a world where Henrique would be a player they would like. He just wouldn't be the player I would add to that team if I had to go out and get a forward.
They literally, Pat Verbeek literally got Klingberg on a 1 year deal to hit the salary floor, and his entire motivation, in my opinion, is to flip it for picks.
But there still has to be a team fit. Is there
any more than you can do than just to flip him to trade deadline time? Let's get as much as we can. He's going to hold it. He's going to dangle it.
100%.
Klingberg's not
I don't
going to
disagree with you, but I don't think Klingberg matches Calgary is my thing.
No. I mean, it could match anywhere. But what would Calgary look at Anaheim for? I would say out of all of that, it would have to be Klingberg, because there's no super attachment. There's no huge amount of money guaranteed after this. He's literally there for a push, and they're within their window. Trying to add a Henrique when you already have a Lindholm, a Kadri, and then even if you want to move him to a wing, you're moving him to a second line wing. Just doesn't make sense at his price point for another season after this. I mean, I don't understand the point of trying to add that. Whereas Klingberg could be there, give you a kick in the ass on the power play, see where that goes. Hopefully it works out, because maybe you're a little bit better against your Edmonton, because that's really their competition come playoff time. They got to get out of the second round. It's going to have to go through Edmonton, whether it's the first round or the second round. And quite honestly, you're not going to beat them offensively, so adding Henrique doesn't make any sense. But adding maybe a power play quarterback like Klingberg might be enough to get you over there. I'm not saying it is, but it's a smaller risk than trying to take on Henrique's contract, for the next season too.
Yeah, if you ask a Flames fan, even though he would never be available, they would say Troy Terry would be the best fit, and for them, I mean, God, you imagine
good old Canadian Calgary Troy Terry.
Imagine him playing with Lindholm and Huberdeau. They would be pretty happy with that. But he's not going anywhere. But yeah, like I could see both sides of it. The only one we know it's not.
But which do you see better?
No, it's Klingberg.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's Klingberg. I think Adam Henrique is.
I know you're trying to play both sides, but all right, I got you nailed that. All right.
No,
cool.
I've said from the beginning it's Klingberg. For sure. No, come on. I've been on your side. Don't worry.
All right, Steven's all there by himself and sad.
Markstrom for Gibson swap. Let's go.
Go Clippers.
Hey, there you go. It got mentioned.
Yeah, I just think, to me, if you move Coleman to third line left wing and you have Henrique with Kadri and Mangiapane, that's a really solid second line.
That's cute.
So that's all. I just think
the Coleman's not a second line winger for me. Like I said before,
right.
Like they need at the deadline. I think they're going to need a top six winger, unless for some reason Chica Pelche just turns into like a 40-50 point guy. For me, if I'm Calgary and what I think they would need and what would fit with them, I don't think it's Adam Henrique. I would go for, a pure rental. I would go for a Patrick Kane or something if he was available. Something like that. Just a dynamic winger who's going to do it all for you. He would be he has the
Phil
1
Kessel.
year, right? Yeah. Go get Patrick Kane.
Patrick Kane would
50% retained, right? 50% retained for Patrick Kane. He's only going to cost you then at that point, I think like $4 or $5 million. Maybe you can ship somebody back to save some cap space.
What did Phil Kessel sign for? 1.5 mil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's not going anywhere, dude. Vegas is not. Vegas is going to be in a playoff spot.
Dude?
Vegas will be in a playoff spot if they add a goaltender. There's absolutely no way they don't add a goaltender. There's no way they go into the season.
Well, they have to, but who? Gonna get it. Who are they going to get? There's going to be a legitimate goalie, and that's going to be a legitimate goalie that a legitimate team wants to give up.
Varlamov,
For
Reimer. Yeah, I don't know what they have left to go.
Once again, I'm saying a legitimate goalie, and you're giving me other goalies. So give me a legitimate starting.
Is Varlamov that much worse than Robin Lehner? I don't think so.
I just like that, but yeah, he's gonna suck in a Vegas defense. Absolutely, he sucked in a New York Islanders defense, unless it was Barry Trotz coaching the team.
Yeah,
And Barry Trotz
is coaching the team.
Okay, okay.
I think if they go out and they add a capable NHL netminder, they will make the playoffs. Will they be the best team in the division? No. I think that
I'm gonna review my notes here. Hang on, Eddie.
Like they would be right in the mix there with.
Oh no! I looked at my notes. No, they don't make it.
They'd be in the mix there, man. For me, for them with Vancouver and LA.
All of the NHL, yes.
Well, yeah. Will they go far in the playoffs? No. But if they add a goaltender,
they have to beat Seattle, LA. Us,
their defense score, their defense score is up there with being just as good as Calgary's, and I think star power up front, even losing Pacioretty, you've got Eichel and Stone.
Stop it, Eddie. Stop it.
You don't want him to be. I don't want him to be good either, man. I wish they would fail, but there's too many good players on that team. If they had a netminder, for them to be completely awful.
All right, sweet.
All right, what do we got left for the Flames here? Because I know we got to kind of we've rounded out the.
I don't think we've talked about plus minus yet. Hang on. So Uyghur was third on Florida in plus minus. Just want you guys to know that. That's probably going to help Calgary. All right, we're done. All right, what's next? Oh, good. I killed Eddie.
That was it? That was your whole plus minus?
Oh, yeah. That was
great.
Yes, that was the last note I had.
Okay, so let's do it this way. Let's just do the 30 kind of questions at the end. Like, fucking simple one-word answers.
All right.
And that's more for me than you two.
Aww.
What is the biggest strength of Calgary? In your opinion?
Goaltending. Are you surprised?
What did you say, Ed?
I was gonna say I was waiting for Jay to come up with an exact one.
It would either be goaltending or coaching.
It's coaching for me for sure.
Yeah, I think it's their coaching, because that's gonna cover a lot of issues that they have. I was gonna say defense, because I really do like the way they're built now back there, but again, a lot of that is gonna come down to coaching. I think Sutter gets the best out of guys like Hannafin and Anderson, and will get it out of Uyghur. So I gotta say coaching.
So I got goaltending 1A, coaching 1B.
Yeah, I would. My second would be goaltending, because Markstrom is exceptional. So
legit.
Okay, so what is their biggest weakness?
Defense.
Scoring depth.
I agree. For me, it's scoring depth as well. Jay
Jay
thinks we're idiots.
No, I
or just like scoring regression, if you want to call it that. Like, I think they've got good players in depth.
I'd maybe say regression. Like, if they're expected to be the third best offensive team, not going to happen. Does that mean that if they hit seventh best offensive team, that all of a sudden they're worse?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So
there's going to be regression, but I don't think their offenses were a weak point. Their offense is going to be still great, in my opinion.
Yeah, I should specify this. I don't think scoring depth is their weakness in terms of it being a bottom 25 weakness. You know what I mean? It's their biggest weakness in a team that really doesn't have a ton of weaknesses, right? Like, it's like saying, picking a weakness in Colorado or Tampa Bay. It's a weakness for them versus the rest of their strength, but across the entire league, they're still significantly better than a lot of other teams. So it's weird to say, because Calgary got deeper.
All right, special teams. That's easy enough. Or assistant coaches.
Calgary got deeper, right? They're a deeper team. They have better matchups. the regression is my worry. So I think their biggest weakness could be their scoring regression, but they'll still be a top 10 team in the league in goal scoring, right? Like that's the thing. Like it's a weakness versus the rest of their everything that's going on.
It'd almost be impossible to be the second best offensive team in a division of 4 divisions and be out of the top 10.
Yeah.
So it's a possibility, but it's unlikely. So to say you're the top third of the NHL in offense, it's just hard to say that's their biggest weakness. I think their defense or their the goals going against them might progress, but I don't know, maybe special teams. I mean, that's maybe a regression. That. They don't necessarily aren't as dynamic on the power play. Maybe a little better on the penalty kill, but I guess power play would probably be the one that you're gonna go like, I don't know where they're gonna make up those goals.
Yeah, you've got Huberdeau, Kadri, Lindholm, but you had Huberdeau, Goodrow, Tkachuk, right? So it's still good. Sorry, you had Goodrow, Tkachuk, and Lindholm, but it's not as good. It's still good, but yeah, how does that all gel together and everything? So, I mean, the one big question you had, it could be their biggest weakness is can these guys integrate together? Can they gel together? Is that is Daryl Sutter going to be enough to be able to put the pieces together and make them work? That could be their biggest weakness, in that there's a lot of new faces in this team. There's a whole new approach in how they're going to play. Philosophically, that could be their biggest weakness. Is all this going to actually work together?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because they're almost changing out the most valuable parts of the car, but the rest of the car is staying the same. You know what I mean?
They took the engine and the wheels crazy. Off and replaced it with some square wheels.
The degree to which they have like an infrastructure around them is significant, and I do think that's where coaching comes in, because I think it'll be a new philosophy for the players coming in. I don't think the team is going to change fundamentally the way they play, so it'll be about kind of like the thing is like how quickly can they get adapted. But it'll be very interesting to see the star power at the top be what is swapped out, which we've never seen. Or I can't think of another time that we've ever seen it like that. Normally, you're making changes on the bottom half of the roster or additions to the top 6. This is, take out
lose
arguably
like
the 2 most important players with 2 new players.
You lose 1 legitimate star, that's it. But you don't lose 2 franchise players within like a 2-week process.
Yeah, so... it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out for them over the course of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and the leaders, you lost 2 of the leaders in that room. Monahan and Tkachuk were alternate captains. Backlund was the other. But things had seemed to go south with Monahan before this season as well. Matthew Tkachuk, there was question marks on how much impact he had on the leadership in that dressing room, rather than him just being handed an A as being one of the better players. The core veterans of that team are still there, right? So like you said, the things that Sutter has instilled will still be there from that team. Huberdeau and Uyghur were coached by Gallant. They were coached by Quenneville for a bit. So they've. I think there's some understanding, and I don't think they'll be too shell shocked by what they hear and what they see from Daryl Sutter when they get there. Nazem Kadri just won a Stanley Cup, so you're adding that to your locker room as well. So I think they'll be able to gel pretty quickly and adapt to that Daryl Sutter philosophy, and then like you said, the rest of the main parts are still there. The guys that know what to expect and are able to kind of help the other guys adjust. So. It shouldn't be too much of a factor, but yeah, the one thing that is the big question mark for me is there's going to be a new play style from this team. How quickly can they adjust to that? How quickly is the chemistry going to form? Are they going to find the right lines right off the bat? How long that's going to take? I think personally Sutter will figure it out fairly quickly, but there could be the first 5 to 10 games could be an interesting thing to watch, and how quickly they put those lines together and they start working.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I don't even think they can have 5-10 games of hiccups, and they're not exactly gonna just fall or sink to the bottom of the Pacific Division. I mean, they could struggle heartily for the first 10 games and be in the top 3. So, in my opinion, even if they sink a little bit, they will come back because they are a much better coach team. They're a far better skilled team. Defense, offense, goaltending, coaching, special teams. They're going to be above most of the other teams that are, quite honestly, pretty much rebuilding. All those other teams will get there, but that's why Calgary's pushing now, because they see what's in the rearview mirror. It's going to catch up to them pretty quick, so they need to try and push now where they can.
Yeah, I mean they do have a hard first 7 games of their schedule, so it'll be interesting to see how.
So
that
no
goes.
Pacific teams they're playing against.
No, they are playing just the better ones. They open against Colorado, then they play Edmonton, Vegas. The easy game is Buffalo, but then they play Carolina, Pittsburgh, and then Edmonton again is their first 7 games. So Buffalo is the easy one. Penguins will be difficult. Hurricanes will be tough. Oilers twice, Vegas and Colorado. So not an easy way to work out the kinks, but after that you play Seattle, you play the Islanders, the Devils twice, Winnipeg, LA. So it gets a little bit easier after that to figure things out.
I think this team comes out of the fucking gate just ready to
Yeah, they should.
They should be, and they're kind of like everyone left. F you guys. Here's what we're going to do. Get the shit out of Edmonton as best they can. But I mean, even like playing your Colorado teams, just like Colorado, there's the possibility of a slow start. They finally got what they needed, what they wanted, and now there's maybe a little lull out of the gate. So I think Calgary is probably going to be a little bit more bite to their game.
So before we move on to the division quick hits, more or less than 111 points and 50 wins for Calgary next year?
Less.
I
don't know how they do it again. Like,
yeah,
it would be fucking incredible if they did it again.
I could see.
You would have to get Daryl Sutter.
I would think all the meddling teams that struggled to play last season are a little bit better, so you don't get necessarily as many of those easy pickup wins.
Yeah.
And then just add in there that Calgary was good. They're a little bit more on the radar. Teams probably aren't going to just overlook them. Now they're a legitimate team that people are like, all right, we got to focus on this guy. This is how we're going to break it down. That sort of deal. And they don't have those dynamic players that they used to, even though Kadri and Huberdeau are great players. They're just not as dynamic.
Yeah, I think it'll be less. I don't think it'll be significantly less, though. I think they'll still be around 46,
they'll be
47
they'll be
wins.
close.
So, they'll be close for sure. So, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the other teams, but just kind of going through them one by one and quick hits on some of these teams. We talked about Edmonton a bunch. They were second last year. Key additions to them, we're locking down Evander Kane, adding in Jack Campbell. Do they do anything else?
And they lost Duncan Keith's dead body and his salary cap hit.
They're going right to the bottom of the Pacific.
Did they get Koskinen out of there?
Yeah,
no, he's still there, isn't he?
No, he's out of there.
Is he?
He's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where he went. I mean, I think he was a UFA actually. So
because Mike Smith was the one who had term left.
What?
Who's their backup?
It's Smith, but he is injured, so it's Stuart Skinner, who is a rookie. He played pretty well last year, but it's going to be Jack Campbell and Smith when he's healthy, and then Skinner is kind of the third
I thought
option.
Smith said he was retiring.
I don't know. He's listed on here still. I think he's still good.
No, I thought he actually signed a contract.
Clefbaum might retire because apparently his injury is career-ending. But
so we expect Edmonton to be the second serious player in this division.
Yeah,
it's between Calgary and Edmonton. Those are 1-2 in my opinion.
I think Edmonton has
mostly because of abundance of offense.
They've got the best top six in the Pacific by a mile, and a lot of it has to do with McDavid and Draisaitl. But I do like Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, and Evander Kane. I think are all really good, and Kyler Yamamoto is a pretty good piece of that top six too. But for them, what's going to get them is depth.
Exact same problem Toronto has.
Yeah, they have no depth in the bottom six. It's Fogle,
and no
Derek
defense,
Ryan,
and no
Puljujärvi, Jack Campbell makes their goaltending better, but the defense in front of them still Nurse, still Barry, Ceci, Brett Kulak, Evan Bouchard, Philip Broberg. So unless Bouchard and Broberg have breakout years next year, it's gonna be.
Are you saying Campbell's better because he's better than Smith, or he's better because he's a good goalie?
He's better than Smith and Koskinen. I think he's proven.
There it is. Okay.
He's proven to be an average to slightly above average goaltender, which is better than what Edmonton's had. But he's by no means Markstrom territory or anything like that. So. But I think we all kind of agree they'll probably be the second best team in this division, right?
Yeah.
Second or first, yeah.
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 I could see them winning the division and Calgary coming in second.
I would see them, yeah.
Yep. No, I could definitely see them winning. All right. Our favorite, the one I thought we were going to get to talk about, LA.
Oh, you wanted to talk about?
No, I didn't want to. I just figured that they were going to make us talk about them. How far
were they on the list? Were they like 4th or 5th?
No, they didn't even make the final vote.
They lost head-to-head to Seattle.
Dear Lord.
Yeah, I know.
All right, so LA.
Better than last year, presumably.
Yeah.
It's just a lot. Slightly. It depends again a lot on the kids, right? Like they added Fiala, which makes them better.
Yeah. And then Brown's gone. Kopitar is not necessarily going to.
Is Brown gone not a positive for them? Like, come on. Are we sure that's not a positive for their team and their performance?
I'm just trying to figure out who's going to replace the goals, the assists, the hits, and the potato drinking.
Anybody. Literally anybody.
I think for them...
All right, Steven, suit up.
The difference between them being a...
Hop on the train.
Middle of the pack, maybe playoff.
He wasn't
team.
bad last season, though, right? He wasn't too bad. What do you have, like almost 20 goals?
Yeah, he was fine, but he's not good anymore.
That's fine.
He was
at now he's gone,
level.
and now he's going to get a statue.
We're not doing it. I'm so pissed. Statue is embarrassing. They should be ashamed of themselves.
I'm so glad it pissed
Honestly,
off.
fuck them. That's all we're going to say about that.
No. We got to talk about
because that's so stupid.
Kempe, Kopitar, Fiala is legitimate. That's a legitimate first line.
All right, that's true. They're adding Fiala.
Byfield and Kaliev are the big question marks for me. And could
Danino will be fine. Or Dano, sorry, Danino. Dano will be fine.
Drew Doughty has to be healthy.
My biggest question is the goaltending. Is like, it was absolutely amazing to see Jonathan Quick play as good as he did.
Was it?
Can he do it again? Can he somehow turn back the hands of time?
Was it amazing to see him play well? I don't know.
I never thought he would actually do what he did last season.
No, neither did I. I thought he was done.
Yeah, I thought the game had passed him.
LA could really. Byfield for me is one of the picks to have a breakout year, and a guy that could break out for like 50 to 60 points if things go the right way for him. If that happens, then they'll obviously be a scary team to match up against with Kopitar, Dano, Byfield down the middle. They've got some good depth and a lot of good young kids on the way, but like I don't know how close any of these guys really are, right? Like we've talked about their drafting for a while, and I honestly haven't, I know it takes time, but I swear to God I haven't seen any of these kids actually make it to the NHL level and do anything for their team yet, which I've been pumping their tires for their drafting over the last couple of years.
Oh yeah, you have.
But nobody has really made it yet. Right, like we're seeing that at least on the Ducks side of things, right? Of guys starting to get there. I know it's Zegras, but
you got what's his name, Bjornfoot and Mikey Anderson are pretty good.
Yeah, they're pretty good, right? Like they're pretty good. Like
they're neat.
Lundestrom is pretty good. Like
Lundstrom's neat.
Okay, fair enough.
Like him.
Yeah,
fair enough.
But we're waiting for. Byfield's got to pop off. Kaliev has to really pop off from what they said.
He will.
Yeah, Turcotte, Kupari, Fagemo, like Akil Thomas, Brent Clark will be here at some point. Like they need these guys to.
Do any of them strike you like a Troy Terry, where it's just like there's like 2 or 3 seasons where you're just like, dude, there's nothing, and then all of a sudden he just boom.
Yeah, Kaliev should be that guy. If
as
he
far
can
as goal scoring, but like any of the other guys, where it just maybe takes a little longer. But then again, you could also have them as like your Sam Steeles, where like, come on.
I mean,
All
like
right.
I would say Turcotte,
Go away.
just because the where he got drafted, like he should be a guy that pops off at some point. You know, 5th overall. You're waiting and waiting and waiting for this kid. Like, he's only 21, and it feels bad to say you're waiting and waiting and waiting. But he played 8 games. He played 8 games and didn't look amazing. Kupari might be that guy. He had 13 points in 57 games, but none of them, like, from when they were drafted and the hype around them from when they got drafted, it's kind of just went downhill from there, where like they haven't lived up to that hype of, oh, this was this guy's favorite, or this was the consensus favorite, and the Kings took the consensus favorite. Then all of a sudden, like, just hasn't panned out. Like, Akil Thomas really hasn't jumped up from where people thought he was. Everybody thought they got a steal in Tyler Madden, and that hasn't panned out yet. Byfield's the real gem of the bunch for them, and the guy I think has the chance to break out. But that's it right now. That would be the guy next year, I would say. If he pops off, and he's the most likely to pop off, then things will go well for them. But everybody else, I don't have any confidence in any of them playing 40 games next year outside of the guys who finished the season with them, and that's Kaliev and Byfield.
I'll just be happy if you stop saying pop off. And then on the top of that, that's why I kind of find like the draft thing just kind of not unnecessary, but totally just close your eyes and throw the dart at the board and see what hits type of deal. Because it's just like you kind of hope that happens, and then a lot of times it doesn't pan out. Most times it doesn't pan out.
Mm-hmm.
So with as far as the Kings, they still have that, and we've had your Sam Steeles and your Troy Terrys. So I just don't know if it takes that much longer to get there for some, I guess, offensive players than it does for maybe the defensive side. But I don't know, like now it seems like offensive players are expected to produce. And if you're not producing, you're kind of a bust. If you haven't produced quickly, you're gone.
Yeah, the expectations have definitely changed. Like, I'm fully prepared in 3 years to eat those words and all these guys make the Kings and, they start just dominating for them. There's plenty of time left. The kids we're talking about are 20, 21, 22 years old, so there's a lot of time for them to turn things around and make the team. My thing with their prospects is nobody has broken out yet. Of all of the guys they have, nobody has stepped into this lineup and really taken off. And Kaliev looked like he was going to do that, but then put up 14 goals and 27 points in 80 games, which isn't bad, but it's not a breakout level. Byfield didn't break out, but nobody, Lafreniere, nobody did from that draft. So it looks like a lot of these guys are going to take some time. Just haven't seen that from anybody in the Kings organization, where you can point to some other teams and guys have done that from the same draft classes. Zegras, yeah. Hughes is starting to do that, but not even some cases the top half of the draft, where you get guys late first and early seconds that have started to pop off for some teams.
Stop saying pop off.
I threw
You're doing so good.
I threw that one in
off.
there for you. Should have never mentioned it. Should have never mentioned
so
it.
Many other things besides pop off until that last moment. Like, oh, Eddie's learning.
I also just want to trash the Kings and talk shit about their prospects. So. All right, Vegas, 4th best team last year.
Crap, dude! Talk about a team that did the opposite of Calgary. They, in my opinion, they lost Pacioretty. Now, given Pacioretty was apparently going to be gone for most of the season, anyways. But then to put all your eggs in that Leonard basket and watch that thing just absolutely crumble, I don't know where they go. There's just no goaltending, and even when they had it, they hated it. And even their backup, they gave him a chance, and not that he did bad, not that he had horrible numbers, but it's a team that's built around offense, not necessarily defense, and definitely like a sensational goalie to save them. And they don't have any sensational goalie. They don't have any defense, and they have a lackluster offense, in my opinion.
The one thing I can't agree with is the terrible defense, because they
don't defend well.
Martinez, Pietrangelo, McNabb, Shea Theodore, Zach Whitecloud, Ben Hutton, like, they did not have a great year defensively last year, but a lot of these guys, Martinez was out for most of the year. Shea Theodore and Pietrangelo were both down for times last year. I don't think any of them played more than 60 games or 70 games. But
so assume they play 70 games and they don't have Liner in net. Is this team a great defensive team?
Yeah,
I think
Bruce Cassidy's really good coach. He's much better than Peter DeBoer.
They're not Calgary level, but I think they are.
That's
better.
A low bar there.
I really do like. I get that it's going to come down to goaltending, but like I do think people are burying Vegas way too fast. That's still a really talented team.
They had 34 games of Eichel and 37 games of Stone. If they get 60 to 70 games of those two, I mean, we talk about defensive impacts from defensemen, but a defense like Mark Stone is one of the best defensive forwards in this entire league. That's going to make a difference for them if he can play an entire season. I love bagging on Vegas. I think it's way too premature to start shitting on them for the Lehner situation, which happened a couple weeks ago. We haven't even that happened.
I'm not shitting on them. I'm just
maybe not specifically you, but I remember the day he got injured, and it was like the next day after that, people were projecting the Golden Knights and like trashing their GM for not acquiring a goaltender and fixing it. I said, dude, it's like it's been a day. It's been a day. And it came out of nowhere that he's out for the entire year.
I mean, everyone knows I'm available, and they haven't asked me yet.
If we get to the season and they have not added anybody to replace Robin Lehner, fine. Then you can start bagging them and say, yeah, they're going to suck. I think if they replace them, they are still a pretty good team. I think if you have to hope that Stone and Eichel are going to stay healthy. Losing Pacioretty is definitely a loss, so they're worse off in that sense. But I still do really like Marchessault, Carlson, and Riley Smith as a second line. They've had the chemistry since that team's inception, and that's a really nice second line to have. Those guys I don't think are first line talents. To have them as second line guys is great. I'm just not a fan of Chandler Stevenson as the top line left wing, but to all his credit, as that guy last year, he had 64 points in 79 games. Can he do that playing with Eichel and Stone? Probably. He's shown he could probably do that with them, and I like that. Despite what you've said, I like their blue line. I like the guys they have there. I think they're capable two-way defensemen, pretty much all of them. A full healthy season of Alec Martinez, where he doesn't only play 26 games, will help them. But it's can you get somebody in to replace Robin Lehner? They added Kessel, which I think helps their depth scoring as well. Maybe you play Kessel with Stone and Eichel, who knows? But they need a goaltender. That's the end of the day is they need a goaltender.
You name 5 guys. Like, as long as they stay healthy, this team's okay.
Yeah.
You name 5 legitimate players that they need to just please stay healthy. And one of them is your goalie.
That's any team, though. I take 5 players from any team and say if they're not healthy,
100%. But you were literally going from last year to this year, and Mark Stone has had many injury problems. Eichel, I mean, obviously he was added halfway through, and you hope that, he can kind of stay through that. Lehner is pretty much gone, so it's got to be a new goalie. And then a handful of other players that are going to just hopefully stay healthy. That being said, through 82 games, more than likely you're going to see some injuries. Are they going to do fine in the Pacific Division? Yes, because it's a weak Pacific Division. Can they get to that third spot? More than likely, given their competition. LA might push them a little bit for that. Is this a team that goes very far in the playoffs? No.
No, I don't think so either. No.
Okay.
They're not.
So it's just like they're if everyone stays healthy, they'll get there. Will they go anywhere? No, but they'll get there. They'll limp into the playoffs and just fall apart.
This is a team to me that I don't want to play in the playoffs.
Well, you're not playing hockey, so you're good.
Yeah, well, see, I'm fine. I think that this is one of those teams that could be. This is one of those things I do where I make a comparison, but shut up, Jay, when I say this.
Stop it.
This team could be, again, they have to address the goaltending, and I get that is a significant question mark. But with the understanding, like you said, Eddie, that just recently happened, and they should be allowed still some amount of time to actually look into their options and not just rush, to go fucking, sign Mikko Koskinen or whatever the fuck. I do think this team could be similar enough to the LA team that went on that deep run from, the 8th seed. Like, I think Bruce Cassidy's a really good coach. Yes, they need their guys to stay healthy, but like, yeah, that's true for everybody. And Jack Eichel and Mark Stone are two very, very good two-way forwards. And if Jack Eichel is fully healthy, he is right in the middle of his prime, and he's a legitimate number one center.
Outside of McDavid, Draisaitl, that's the best duo talent-wise in the entire Pacific Division.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Like Petrangelo's really good. Like, I don't think over the course of 82 games, maybe you're going to get his best more than 65, 70 times, or maybe even 55 times. But in a playoff, I trust him to lock in. Shea Theodore, Alec Martinez, like Eddie said, like these are guys who have played meaningful games. Like I do think this team has the ability to be a spoiler. I think there is a cap on how far they can go just because of the goaltending question mark. But this is not a team that I would be quick to bury. Like, I could see Phil Kessel putting up 40 goals next year, just out of nowhere. Like, I could totally see that happening.
All right. Vancouver. We talked about them a little bit. I think their forward group I really like. I like more than a lot of teams. Thatcher Demko, we talked about. He could potentially be the second best goalie in this division behind Markstrom. He's got the talent to do so. It all falls apart in the blue line because it's an absolute goddamn fucking mess. Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Tyler Myers is their top pairing. As dynamic as Quinn Hughes is defensively, he's not good. And that's been a couple seasons of just not being good defensively. And he's paired with Luke Schenn right now, according to their depth chart. And then they've got Travis Dermott, Kyle Burrows, Jack Rathbone, Tucker Poolman as other defensemen on this team, and really nobody else to come into this roster. So that's going to be their downfall for me. Bruce Boudreau coach team, I think they'll do well. Playoff wise, that's where they're going to fall apart. But other than that, man, like, JT Miller, Connor Garland, Pedersen, Horvat, Besser, Podkolzin, I think is going to have a breakout year, and he's going to be really good. And Mikheyev was a good addition for them as well. So their forward group is fun. Just that defense is their undoing. If they had a few other good defensemen in that mix, I'd probably put them in the same mix as Calgary, as being one of those teams who could really compete for the top of the division.
Yeah, they're Edmonton 0.5. So Edmonton is its thing, and then they're kind of just following a little bit of that, where it's just we got pretty good offense, we got crappy defense, and I guess in this instance they actually have a decent goalie. But at this point, they're just Bruce Boudreau is great at getting his team to score goals, but when it comes down to defensive structure, he's not the greatest coach, and his job, I guess, will be just managing this team enough to get into the playoffs or maybe a wild card spot, because he's going to have a hard time beating those other top teams.
Yeah, I think this is a team that probably ends up 14, 15, 16 in the lottery. I think they miss the playoffs ultimately, but I don't think it's by more than, 8, 9 points in the standings. I think they're going to score enough goals throughout the season to win enough games to stay in the race, but the defense is a mess, and they're probably going to trade JT Miller, and they still have the whole Horvat question. They're trying to move out Connor Garland, who's a legitimate top 6 winger. Like, it's a weird situation, but I do expect them to be pretty competitive on a nightly basis, even if it's more going to be 4-3 kind of games, and it's going to be 1-0 kind of games.
All right, San Jose.
They're gonna fucking suck.
Yeah, by Seattle.
Seattle
or San Jose is the new worst team in the Pacific Division for me.
Yeah, they're terrible.
They're just. Myers great, Hurdle's great, Couture if he can actually stay healthy for longer than, he played 77 games last year, to his credit, but that was the first time I've really ever seen him play through an entire season. Outside of that, like there's nothing to write home about in that forward group. That bottom 6 is just terrifying. And then on defense, you lose Brent Burns, and you don't really have much else there. You've got an aging, injury-prone Erik Karlsson. You've got Mario Ferraro, Vlasic, who kind of is in that same category as aging, maybe not injury prone as Karlsson is. And then it's Benning, Simic, Nudavara, just kind of replacement level players from there. And you've got Reimer and Kakinen, and I actually think they got better in net somehow by getting out, bringing in Capo Kakinen. I think James Reimer was good for them. But from there on out, like, unless Eklund is jumping into this lineup and breaking out, or Thomas Bordeleau or somebody like that is having a really good year, for me, they're bottom of the league, which sucks because we're not bottom of the league, but bottom of the division. I don't want them to have any chance at Connor Bedard, so I hate to say that they're going to suck, but they're not going to be good next year.
No, and isn't it crazy to think how just a few years ago it was going to Karlsson and Burns, and you cannot stop what San Jose is about to bring on the whole fucking league, and then it just absolutely fell off the rails. So it's kind of insane. There's no goaltending. I love me some Reimer as far as his style, his technique is very good. I like that, but as good as it is, he's aging and he's on a team that is no longer good defensively. So there's almost no hope. I don't care how good technically you are, because Carey Price has also been on horrific teams, and you've seen where that goes. But I viewed him as a very great, one of the best technical goalies. So from goaltending to defense to a lackluster offense, I can't see San Jose doing anything other than sucking.
So, yeah, I'm sitting here and I'm trying to talk myself into, like, okay, well, where can you find silver lining here and there? And it all comes down to one thing for me. Their head coach is David Quinn. Like, they're going to suck. And to Eddie's point, I don't want them to be that bad because I don't want them to get Connor Bedard.
Oh, that's why.
But, like, I also do think that, like, Mike Greer is going to probably start trying to rip some of this down. And I don't know if they're going to be able to move Logan Couture, but they're definitely going to be able to move Timo Meier. They're probably going to be more than able to move,
Yeah, Meier's a pending RFA too, so he's out the door.
Nick Bonino and I like Mario Ferraro a lot. I think there is a version of this defense that isn't a complete and total fucking disaster, but it's not under David Quinn. And that's the problem for me, is fundamentally I just don't think a team with David Quinn can be successful. Like, I hope I'm proven wrong. I hope, that he comes in and instills a system and they win just enough games to miss out on Connor Bedard or whatever the fuck. But, like, I have no reason to think he is going to be a significantly better coach this time around.
No. Hurdle, Meier, Couture, they'll win them some games, but they, for me, will be the clear worst team in the Pacific Division. And then we move on to the last one because we're not going to cover Anaheim. As we mentioned, we're going to do our season preview on the Ducks later. But Seattle, I thought Seattle had one of the better off seasons. I really like what they did. They were bad last year by far. I think points-wise, the worst team in the Pacific Division, right? They were like 12 points below Anaheim. But you add Burakovsky to this. You add Bjorkstrand, which was a steal to that team. Who was the other addition for them was Justin Schultz, right? So you had Justin Schultz, and then you had Martin Jones. So those two are kind of low key.
Michael Kempney.
But just adding Burakovsky and Bjorkstrand to that forward group, a full season of Matty Beniers, who he only played 10 games, but he had 9 points in those 10 games, and potentially Shane Wright. Like, I don't think he's gonna break out and have a McKinnon 60-point type year in his rookie season, but if he comes in and just plays some games and looks pretty good for them. Even without him, I like their top 6 as is, with Schwartz, Beniers, Eberle, McCann, Gord, Burakovsky, Bjorkstrand, Wenberg, and either Donato or Tanev if he's healthy. It's not bad. It's better depth than a lot of other teams in the league, and I think if Beniers can break out and be in the Calder race, they're all of a sudden a team that just kind of is not a lot of fun to play against. Like, they look like a sneaky, dangerous team with just those 3 key additions up front in Beniers, Burakovsky, and Bjorkstrand.
Listen, this team will go 82-0 if all 82 games are against Montreal. Because if Shane Wright gets the opportunity to play against Montreal 82 times, he is going to stuff it down their throats because he was so pissed.
I think Montreal would be perfectly happy with that.
Yeah,
they would love to go 82.
Seattle will be better than San Jose. Sure, why not? Maybe they'll be even. Who knows?
They might be. I was gonna say something, and I probably shouldn't say it on this podcast.
Oh, Anaheim's worse.
I said that I was gonna say they might be better. They might be better than us at the end of the season.
I think that's totally possible. I think for me, like they have, like they kind of remind me of the Devils a few years ago, where it's like they've got a couple of young pieces that could be really big down the line, but they're not there yet. And then they've got some good pieces surrounding that.
Who's their goalie again?
For Seattle?
Grubauer, Dreiger, Jones.
No, Grubauer, who I don't think is great, and I think ultimately.
No, you hate him.
Ultimately hurts.
Where'd you go? Oh,
sorry. I think he ultimately hurts their ability to be contenders. But I could see a situation where they finish closer to 10, 11 or 12 even than they do to 4 or 5. I think Eddie's right. I think there's going to be enough kind of, I don't know, gumption or whatever the fuck in that team. It should be interesting. Yanni Gourde's not bad. I think they're going to be able to find some leadership on that team, and it's just going to be see what Matty Beniers and maybe Shane Wright have in the back pocket. But they feel very Jersey-like to me.
Yeah, they're going to be bad. They're likely not going to be a playoff team, but they will be better than they were last year. You get a full season of Beniers, who looked good. You get, you've added on the back end 118 points in Bjorkstrand and Burakovsky, both of which had more points than anybody on the team last year. And then you get a full season of Schwartz, who only played 37 games for the team last year. So you've added 4 players to your team that all of a sudden all 4 of them jump into your top 6. So it just makes you a better team offensively next year. Defensively, they're not much different. In the net, they're not any different. So that's where the shortcomings are going to come from. But they will be more dynamic offensively, which is going to win them some games. They're are they better than LA on paper? Are they better than some of those other teams? No, they're not. But they're right in the mix there. With Anaheim and potentially Vancouver as a team that will win more games than they did last year and could upset a few teams. So I like their business at the very least. They will make it more fun for their fans to watch them this upcoming season.
Yeah, I agree. I think they had a really, really good offseason, and I don't think it'll matter for 2-3 years.
All right. Well, that's it, guys. That's our Pacific Division preview. You guys picked Calgary, so if you hated it, that's on you. Blaming this one on you guys. Up next, what we're going to the Central next?
Yeah. We're going to do Dallas in the Central Division.
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, we picked this one, so we're going for the Dallas Stars. And obviously we'll recap the rest of them.
Apparently you guys are not in charge anymore, you fans. You guys are drunk at the wheel. We gotta start picking better teams.
We probably will open the pickup again for one of the East teams, either
Atlantic. We're gonna have them vote which division, Central, Atlantic or Metropolitan, and then whatever we'll go from there and do the same thing. Yeah,
same as last time. You got to pick Pacific or Central, and you picked Pacific. And then you picked the team. So we'll do the same for the upcoming ones. Next is Dallas. We're probably going to try and record that next week if we can. Get a few of these shows out before we do our regular season preview for the Ducks and start to talk about the upcoming season from obviously a Ducks perspective, since this is a Ducks podcast.
Allegedly.
And yeah, I don't think we really had any Ducks news other than Zegras being on the cover for NHL 23, but we'll cover that.
The jersey numbers, we'll get.
We don't even need to really cover that because everybody.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
But all right, well, thanks for coming out, guys. Thanks for jumping on the show today, Jay. It was nice to have you back on. I want to say thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks to Pat somewhere over here for coming on the show. But yeah, we'll be back. We'll have our plans for the upcoming season soon. But thanks for coming out, guys, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.
Later, bud.